Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of IWASE-SAN'S table. This is the first time I am speaking to you through this channel, and honestly, it took me much longer than I have expected to begin with this. But, well, it's never too late to take the first step. At some point, we have to stop postponing the things we really want to do, and even we have different situations in life that can make us leave our projects or leave some dreams behind, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for years. We can find eventually a good spot to come back again to those dreams and take it over one more time and make them real and complete them. So, for this first episode, I wanted to begin with something special for me, which is the Legend of the Five Rings. So, before talking about its history, mythology, geography, or clans, I need to explain why this game is so important to me. The Legend of the Five Rings is one of the most important tabletop role playing games in my personal history. It was one of the first games I had the opportunity to play with friends. It was also the first game in which I had participated in a long campaign which lasted for more than a year, actually. And it was also the first campaign where I had uh, a character that basically I treasure it in my heart for a very long time. It was my role model basically for all the other games that I had play with friends through my entire life. Just to name you a few: Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire Dark Ages, D&D, Pathfinder. Um, Before talking about its history, mythology, geography, or clans, I need to explain why this game is important to me. The Legend of the Five Rings is one of the most important tabletop role-playing games in my entire history. It was one of the first games I had the opportunity to play with my friends, and it was also the first game in which I participated in a long campaign, which actually lasted for more than a year. And it was also the first time I have a character that I could bring from 0 to 100. I actually got him to become a sensei, have a family, and everything else. He was one of my favorite characters, actually, and he belonged to the Unicorn clan. Later on, I have continued using his son, and which become part of the Yuji clan, but that is a story for another video. So, besides this, I wanted also to stop here and send a big hug to my old game master, Leo. Thank you very much for bringing this awesome history and these awesome role playing games that have come along with me in my entire life. One of the things that I can highlight out of this is that that campaign helped me to learn how to play, but also how to grow as a player and later as a narrator. Role playing games open an important window for me. They have encouraged me to translate, to write, and to begin developing my own stories, even when some of those stories took many years to find their final form. Legend of the Fire Rings was also the first game I had the pleasure of running for a long period of time. I have directed it for different groups and experienced several editions throughout history. One of the editions that I would truly recommend for any newcomers is the fourth edition, which I believe is the most complete and is the easiest one to start with. It will give you a good landscape of the whole history of Legend of the Five Rings. So if you have the chance to grab one copy, please go ahead and do it. Regarding the fifth edition, however, I have skipped. I have read it, but I have skipped playing it. Not because I declare a blood field against it. It's just life simply moved in another direction. And you know, when you grow up, how difficult it is to arrange a role playing game session with everyone, right? Everyone has their wars, their families to take care of. So it's really difficult, especially to keep long campaign as we used to have in our teenage ages. Review, I am not going to give a ranking for this game. I'm not going to tell you which edition is objectively superior to any other or why, because I honestly don't have that mindset over this. I always receive with open hands and open arms uh, any good new edition, and always willing to try new role playing games. So this is not about it, and I'm not certainly not going to pretend, sorry, that every rule supplement or decision was perfect. This is my own experience with the game, my opinion, and also my way of remembering it. And I think mostly remembering how I used to play with my games and my friends and everyone around, you know, and the good times, the all good times. So this is why I wanted to talk about Legend of the Fire Rings, how it developed, and why Rokugan became such an important place for many role-playing games players. So let's move forward. Where did Legend of the Fire Rings comes from? Uh, well, actually, this will take you by surprise, or maybe not, but the card game came first. The setting was created by a group that include several talented people, uh, Sincere, Dave C, Ryan Daisy, Dave Williams, Matt Wilson, Trindle, and John Wick. Yeah, John Wick. You heard it. It was first published in 1995 through a partnership between Alderac Entertainment Group and IC Media. So if you have the first edition, you will see that down there it says AAAEG. So this was never the product of one isolated creator. Actually, it was developed by several writers, designers, and talented artists, which is appropriate because Rokugan itself has never suffered from a shortage of operating voices, political factions, or people quietly disagreeing in the same room. The role-playing game followed in 1997, and it allowed players to stop observing Rokugan through armies, provinces, and cards, and finally enter that world as individual characters. The first RPG was successful enough to receive the Origins Award for Best Role Playing Game of 1997, and it was followed by a considerable number of supplements. So, here's where we come in. How the players help to write the history. One of the most interesting features of the original card game was that tournament results could influence the official storyline. Players were not simply choosing a clan because they like its color, philosophy, or particularly unhealthy relationship with honor. Their own victories could affect wars, political events, and even the survival of characters. When I say survival of characters, it will be the historical characters that later on will appear on the main core rulebooks that we have of Legend of the Five Rings. Some of the cards were directly connected to the results of the tournaments and even included the name of the player associated with that event. So the history of Rokugan was not written only by authors. Part of it was decided by people arriving at tournaments with carefully prepared decks and very strong opinions about uh, wider clan served to control the whole Shade Empire. And I love Shade Empire. Good game, by the way. This also made the storyline feel alive. The community was not standing outside the setting and it was participating in its development. Now, a little bit of history of the whole Legend of the Fire Rings publishing. Um, First of all, the property had changed hands several times throughout time. Five Rings Publishing Group took control of production and marketing. Wizards of the Coast purchased that company in 1997, while AEG continued producing the role-playing game under license. AEG later recovered ownership of the property and continued developing both the card game and the RPG until 2015. That year, Legend of the Fire Ring was sold to Fantasy Flight Games. Fantasy Flight created a new card game using the living card game format. Unlike a traditional collectible game, the packs contain fixed sets of cards rather than randomized boosters. Actually, I have this game. It's very interesting. It can take several hours actually to play it, and definitely it is a thing for family feuds or fights. Actually, if you get into the card game, that version was released in 2017 and discontinued in 2021. A fifth edition of the role-playing game appeared in 2018. It introduced a new version of the roll and keep system using special dice. Um, if you have played other role-playing games like Warhammer, this will be familiar to you also. The RPG line was later transferred to Edge Studio, which also released adventures in Rokugan using rules compatible with the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. This is why speaking about Legend of Five Rings can become complicated. We have different companies, different editions, different card games, and more than one version of the official timeline. Be careful with this one. So it depends which canon timeline you like most is the one you're going to be using, but try to read the other canon lines to see or not have plot holes, especially. So anyway, but beneath those changes, the central identity remained recognizable. Rokugan is still a war of clans, duty, personal conflict, and decisions that rarely have a completely clean solution. There are many clans related to this clean solution token, um, especially when you have read, fortunately, the Cup of the Scorpion, which I truly recommend reading it to have an idea of one of the most important events in Rokugan. So if you get a copy of that, go ahead, get it. Anyway, you can find a summary of it on the fourth edition too. And now that the administrative history is out of the way, we can return to the much simpler subject of the 1000 years of political conflict. Oh, sorry. The books for the first time, it is natural to think that immediately it's about feudal Japan. There are samurai, daimyos, castles, temples, swords, clans, courtly traditions, and conflicts connected to loyalty and honor. But Rokugan, it is not about Japan. It is not Japan, and actually is somewhat, discouraged among game masters, especially the most traditional ones, to talk or make comparisons about how Japan was in its feudal age. So it is not a direct alternative version of the Japanese history. There is no simple correspondence between Rokugani events and the shogunate, the Sengoku period, or the Meiji Restoration. Rokugan is a fictional setting with strong Japanese influences combined with elements inspired by China, Mongolia, Korea, and other Asian cultures. It has its own geography, its own political history, its own religion and mythology, and its own internal logic. So it is better to approach Rokugan with an open mind and as its own world rather than attempting to identify two historical Japanese equivalents of every clan, family, or band. Uh, it is better and encourage you to make your own history. Or maybe if you have fantasies of being a samurai, uh, that would be a better approach to face this game. Language and terminology. One of the things that makes the setting immediately recognizable is its use of Japanese terminology. If you want to get your game master crazy, start talking in Japanese, especially if you are an N1, be my guest. Go ahead and make your game master crazy. I used to do that. It was really funny. So throughout the books, we encounter words such as samurai, bushi, shugensha, daimyo, dosho, genpuku, and ronin. Some of these words will already be familiar to players and Japanese students. Others require some more explanation, and their meaning inside Rokugan is not always identical to their complete historical meaning in Japan, but the terminology helps establish the atmosphere of the setting. You will quickly understand that a bushi is generally a trained warrior. A shugensha, on the other hand, is a priest capable of communicating with elemental spirits. A daimyo is a lord, and a ronin is a samurai without a master or clan. And of course, you can be a ronin, become later on a daimyo, depending on how you develop your own character and what your game master allows you to do, or basically a sorcerer of a sort, which is the Shugensha. Shugensha, sorry. Uh, you do not need to learn every term before creating your first character. Fortunately, the game does not begin with a language examination or JLBT exam. So, let's talk about a little bit the five rings. The title naturally reminds many people about Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of Five Rings, but the game builds its own world and mechanics around the five elemental rings, and this will be familiar to you if you have seen other series: Air, Earth, Fire, Water, and Void. Yeah, Void. These are not only physical elements, they are also ways of understanding personality, behavior, and the manner in which someone approaches a problem. Earth represents stability, patience, and resistance. Water represents movement, flexibility, and adaptation. Fire represents energy, creativity, and aggression. Air represents subtlety, perception, and indirect action. Void represents instinct, emptiness, and a connection with something beyond ordinary understanding. The exact mechanic change between editions, but the fire rings remain central to the identity of the game. Now, to begin with the part 2 of this video, we have the founding myth, Materasu and Onotango. To understand Rokugan, we need to speak briefly about its founding mythology. And I do mean briefly because the complete celestial history becomes complicated very quickly. In the beginning of, well, when we find Amaterasu, Lady Sun, and Otangu, Lord Moon, the name Amaterasu will probably sound familiar. It is inspired by the Japanese sun goddess, although Legend of the Five Rings uses these figures to create its own mythology rather than directly reproducing Shinto tradition. Again, it's not Japan, it's Rokugan. To me, the story feels like a Shinto inspired creation myth told with the family tragedy of Greek mythology. There are gods, there is jealousy, there is betrayal, children fighting for their parents, and several decisions are made that will make any normal family gathering possible. Uh, Not even mentioning the basically opening the stomach of your own dad to, well, free your other siblings. Amaterasu and Onotangu had divine children known as the Kami. Seven of them would become the founders of the great clans. Hida founded the Crab clan, Doshi founded the Crane, Togashi founded the Dragon, Kodo the Lion, Shiba the Phoenix, Bayushi the Scorpion, Shinsho the Unicorn, and there were also Hantei, our little friend Hantei, who would become the first emperor, and Fulen, whose relationship with the family became considerably less pleasant. Hantei won a tournament between the divine siblings and was selected to rule the new empire, which is why basically all the emperors, at least until Akodo came, um, were named after Hantei and numbered accordingly. Hantei the first, the second, the third, and so on. The others accepted different responsibilities and established the clans that would carry their names and philosophies. Regarding Lord Moon, Onotangu's very reasonable parenting method. Onotangu feared that his children would eventually overthrow him, so he decided to swallow them one by one. This is not usually the first option recommended in books about parenting or how to raise your children, of course. Amaterasu attempted to save the children by giving Onotangu sake. Yeah, sake. And a lot of it. We are talking about a god. I don't know what is the stop limit for a god on getting drunk, actually. When the time came for him to consume Hantei, she replaced the child with a stone wrapped in his clothing. Onotango swallowed it and eventually fell asleep. Amaterasu raised and trained Hantei, that was a very long sleep. So when he was ready, Hantei confronted his father and opened his stomach, freeing his brothers and sisters. The kami fell from the celestial heavens into the mortal war, the war of Rokugan. Well, actually, it was not called Rokugan at the time. But there was someone else who did not fall along their brothers, Fulen. He fell much farther, passing through the mortal war into somewhat Shigoku pit, let's call it, the realm of torment. And now, Fulen returned, Fulen and the Shadowlands, which is there is a very interesting supplement about it. Fulen eventually returned, corrupted, and, of course, was extremely angry. Actually, from his perspective, his brothers and sisters had founded an empire, divided its territory, and apparently made no serious efforts to go and rescue him, not even asking where he was, although they were actually kamis and they could run across the whole realm looking for traces of his lost brother. I would be angry too. He brought the forces of Shigoku into Rokugan. Among them, goblins, ogres, oni, undead creatures, and many other beings associated with the Shadowlands. Basically, the family disagreement became a national emergency. Hantei and the great clans gathered armies to oppose him, but conventional weapons and magic were not enough. Every battle forced the Emperor's forces to retreat. So the great Shinsei came along the way. As the Emperor prepared for final confrontation, a small traveling monk approached Hantei. His name was Shinsei. The name is often translated as the New Way. Hantei was not immediately impressed and ordered his guards to remove him from the court. Shinsei defeated them without using a weapon, in just a second. This was very efficient way of requesting a second interview. Hantai then questioned Shinsei throughout the night. Chiba remained beside them, recording their conversation. Well, and not actually recording, but writing down whatever was talked between them. Those teachings later became known as the Tao of Shinsei, one of the most important philosophical and religious texts in Rokugan. Shinsei explained that Fulen could not be defeated by his divine brothers and sisters. The task had to be performed by mortals. One champion was chosen from each great clan. Together, they become known as the Seven Thunders. Shinsei led them into the Shadowlands to confront Fulen. Their actions allowed Fulen to be defeated and sealed with the Black Scrolls, although the victory came at an enormous cost. This story establishes several ideas that remain central to the setting. The empire was founded by divine beings. Each great clan inherited part of the personality of its founder. Fulang is not simply an external demon, he belongs to the same family, and when the gods failed to solve the problem, mortal had to finish the job, which is fairly good foundation for a role-playing game. The gods create the world, make an enormous mess of it, and leave the player characters to deal with the consequence. The Book of Earth. The first edition rulebook is divided according to the five rings, as we speak. The first section is Earth. That makes sense. Before explaining combat magic or character creation, the game first establishes the ground beneath our feet. The Book of Earth introduces the history of the Empire, the great clans, the geography of Rokugan, its culture, religion, economy, and social order. More importantly, it begins explaining how the people of Rokugan understand their place in their world. Creating a samurai is relatively easy. Understanding why that samurai cannot simply do whatever the player wants is where the real work begins. But before that, let's talk about the Thousand Years of Peace. After the defeat of Fulen came the period commonly described as the Thousand Years of Peace. The name should not be taken too literally. The clans continue fighting over territory, political influence, and resources. They simply did not so under the authority of the emperor rather than attempting to destroy the entire empire every Tuesday. The original kami eventually grew older, their children and descendants assumed their duties. Each clan developed its own customs, schools, institutions, and personality. They built castles, temples, and cities. They competed for the land. They gained influence in the imperial court, and they interpreted the teachings of Shinsei in their own ways. Over time, the clans become much more than extensions of their founders. They become large political and cultural societies with different families, traditions, and internal conflicts. So let's talk about the Great Clans. The Crab Clan. The Crab defended the southern border of Rokugan. Their main responsibility is protecting the Empire from the Shadowlands. Because of this, they are usually practical, physically strong, and less concerned with elegant behavior than many other clans. The rest of Rokugan often considers them rude. The crab generally considers the rest of Rokugan fortunate enough to have time to notice about it. And actually they are really fortunate to have such a strong clan in those borders. Not only they keep the big great wall standing up and protecting Rokugan, but they also made one of the best blacksmiths in the entire Emerald Empire. And actually, they might not be the best guest at your party or your wedding, but they are definitely honorable. And if you show courage and bravery, they will truly respect you. A corrupt samurai might not always speak beautifully, but when an oni arrives, nobody asks the crane poet to stand in front of it. The Crane Clan. The Crane are associated with culture, diplomacy, art, and political influence. They help define what the empire considers civilized. Their courtiers understand etiquette as a form of power. Their artists shape fashion, poetry, and ceremony. Their duelists pursue precision and perfection. Where the craft defends the physical border of the empire, the crane defends its cultural identity. A craft might break down your door, but a crane will convince everyone that the door never legally belonged to you. The Dragon Clan. The dragon live largely apart from the rest of the empire in the northern mountains. For many players, actually, they are seen as Shaolin monks, actually, saving the distances. They are took like shape-headed Shaolin monks. They are philosophers, monks, investigators, mystics, and unconventional warriors. The Mirumoto are famous for using two swords. The Togashi follow a spiritual and often mysterious paths. The Kitsuki investigate crimes through evidence and observation, which can appear suspicious in a society where testimony and status often matter more than physical proof. The dragon are deliberately difficult to understand. Their founder apparently believed that giving a direct answer would spoil the experience. And actually, regarding Togashi, they say that the Togashi, the current Togashi, at the head of Dragon, is actually the Kami Togashi. But that depends on each game master, I guess. Then we have the Lion Clan. The Lion are the military heart of the empire. They value courage, discipline, duty, history, and battlefield excellence. Their armies are among the largest and most organized in Rokugan. The Lion preserve detailed records of their ancestors and victories. They do not simply remember history, they also make certain that everyone else remembers the correct version of it. Their greatest strength is discipline. Their greatest problem is that an honorable frontal assault remains a frontal assault, even when supported by several centuries of military documentation. And by the way, something that I always say about the lion. If you want to make a good lion bushy, you have to tell about your exploits and your ancestor exploits, which is often leads to a entire long story about how good you are and how you're going to defeat your enemy. Which for other clans like the Scorpion, well, we can say they can might take some advantage while you are bragging about it. The Phoenix clan. The Phoenix are strongly connected to religion, scholarship, and elemental magic. Their Shugensha are among the greatest spiritual authorities in Rokugan. They study the kami and attempt to preserve balance between the mortal and spiritual worlds. They often speak about peace, harmony, and restraint. This does not prevent them from asking a fire spirit to destroy a building. Simply means that they will explain the theological reasons before the building burns down. The Scorpion clan. The Scorpions serve the Empire through espionage, deception, and method that other clans publicly condemn but privately require. They wear masks because, according to their philosophy, everyone in Rockland hides behind a social mask. The Scorpions are simply honest enough to make theirs visible, which is exactly the sort of argument a professional liar would make. The repetition is terrible. This is partly deserved and partly useful. Scorpion stories often revolve around extremely loyal expressed through extremely questionable behavior. They perform the work the Empire needs while allowing everyone else to pretend that no such work exists. So basically, the Scorpion clan, which is, I'm going to say, one of my favorites here, uh, are not the bad guys. They have their own reasons and are a good. They made a good example that Some stories are, some history actually, are written by the winners, not by the losers, but the losers took a great and important place in its development. Um, and regarding Bayushi, actually, I take him as, let's say, Severus Snape, again, saving the distances, but you will see why later on. Not in this video, go and read it. I'm not going to spoil that for you. We have then the Unicorn Clan. The Unicorn left Rokugan for centuries and traveled beyond the Empire. When they returned, they brought foreign customs, different weapons, new belief, and the finest cavalry in Rokugan. Other clans often treat them as outsiders. Hmm, talking about bullying. The Unicorn generally look at the rest of Rokugan as people who have spent several centuries discussing proper sleep length while refusing to explore beyond the nearest mountains. Their mobility, adaptability, and willingness to learn from other cultures make them distinctive. The Moto family, which was the family of my first actual character, actually, represents one of the harder and more aggressive traditions within the clan. What attracted me was that the unicorn belonged to Rokugan, but were never completely accepted by it. We can make a difference regarding that about the Shinjo, maybe. But they were insiders and outsiders at the same time. For a new player, that creates a very natural way to discover the world. And the Unicorn Clan, I take it as one of the easiest way to start this war because it allows you to have some concessions regarding how you behave in court, how you behave uh, through the ways, the different roads, and with other people as well. You are always be considered basically a gaijin here, an outsider. Rokugan contains almost 200 volcanoes. Around 50 of them are still active. There are also hundreds of hot springs throughout the mountain regions. Only around the one-fifth of the territory is truly flat. The rest consists of steep hills, narrow valleys, ravines, mountain passes, and difficult terrain. As one approaches the coast, land becomes flatter and more suitable for agriculture, ports, and large cities. This geography affects everything. Flat land is valuable because it can produce rice. Mountain passes are important because armies and merchants must travel through them. Castles are often constructed on high ground or around narrow approaches where a relatively small force can control the road. Geography is not simple decoration on the map. It determines food, wealth, travel, and war. Now, it's time to point the finger to the pink elephant in the room. Can we play with ninjas? And then, of course, we arrive at the sensitive topic. Officially, ninjas are criminals, myths, or stories used to frighten people. No honorable clan will admit to be employing spies or assassins. Some clans simply have remarkably quiet servants who appear inside locked rooms for completely unrelated reasons. Ninjas are not a separate social caste. They are individuals whose activities fall outside the accepted celestial order. Their work is illegal, dishonorable, and or officially denied. This creates one of the most recurring jokes of the setting. Ninja does not exist. There are only several families, schools, techniques, adventures, and supplements explaining exactly how the people who do not exist can operate. And now, the second pink eyed elephant. has time to talk about Bushido. So this might be the most important part of the Book of Earth. And it's also one of the most difficult parts for new players. Not the combat rules, not the magic, but the behavior. And of course, it depends on how strict your game master is. How should I speak before my lord? How should I address someone of higher rank? Can I contradict an order? What happens if my lord orders something or something dishonorable? What happens when my personal sense of honor conflicts with my duties? These questions are not decoration; they are the game. A new player often approaches Rokugan thinking that social restrictions will prevent their character from acting, but those restrictions create many of the most interesting decisions. You are not playing someone who is free to do anything without consequences. You are playing someone whose actions affect a family, a clan, ancestor, and a lore. And what in life actually you can do without affecting your surrounding, actually. So if you look it from that point of view, shouldn't be that difficult. So this does not mean that the character cannot be a rebel or cannot become a Ronin of some sort. It means rebellion has a cost, and that cost is what gives the decision a meaning. And that meaning after ends in duels, fights, maybe being uh, exiled from your own clan, right? Another common mistake is to treat honor and obedience as exactly the same thing. They are connected, but they are not identical. A lord might give you a lawful order that is morally terrible. A character may obey and preserve duty while damaging personal honor. Another character might refuse and protect innocent people while destroying their position in society. There is no single answer that works in every situation. That is one reason Legend of the Five Rings can create such powerful campaigns and scenarios as well. The conflict is not always between good and evil, and actually is rarely seen as good and evil, except for the Shadowlands, right? Sometimes it is between two responsibilities that cannot both be fulfilled, and the player has to decide which failure the character is willing to accept or at what cost you are going to push your character in order to protect others. In my case, particularly for my dear unicorn, he has a somewhat honorable death, but he has to become corrupt in order to allow their partners to escape and defeat one of the leaders of the fallen Moto family in the Shadowlands. So that was hard. I almost cried. What I like most about the first edition actually is that it was simple. And I like it most because I'm 40 years old and, well, if I want to run a small campaign or something, I have to be fast and go directly to the point, right? And the character creation was fast, the basic differences between the clans were clear, the distinction between a Bushi and a Shueisha was understandable, the warfare felt large, but the entrance was manageable. You could create young samurai, complete their genpuku, and send them into their first adventure without first reading an encyclopedia. That accessibility mattered. It allowed the setting to reveal itself during the the play. And currently, what I have seen is that it got more complex, has a lot of background history, which I truly appreciate. But for people my age, I think it's better to keep matters simple, create your character simple, and begin to play. So basically, that is what I believe is the main advantage of keeping at hand the first edition of The Legend of the Five Rings. Anyway, if you get the chance to get the supplements of the first edition, first and second edition, um, they can get the game a little bit more convoluted, but they also gave the war more texture. They expanded the families, schools, religions, political conflicts, and secret organizations. They answered initial character questions. They explored the minor clans. They developed the Shadowlands. They introduced different peoples and foreign lands. They, s- the simplicity of the original core book slowly disappeared, but Rokugan became deeper. That is the balance. The early game was easier to enter, the later game contained more possibilities and more detail. Neither approach is automatically perfect, they simply offer different experiences. So, as a final conclusion, for me, Legend of the Five Rings remains one of the most important tabletop role playing games I have ever played. Not because every rule was perfect, not because every supplement improved the game, and certainly not because decades of evolving continuity can be understood without notes, diagrams, and a very patient historian. It matters because it taught me that a role playing campaign could be about more than defeating enemies and collecting rewards. A sword fight could matter because of the person you were ordered to fight. A conversation could be more dangerous than a battlefield. A victory could destroy your reputation. An honorable decision could be morally wrong, and a dishonorable decision could save the innocent life. This really took me over my days playing games like um, Ultima 7, Blackgate, even um, Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, when you basically become the avatar of the later uh, deployments of the Ultima story. And you will see many coincidences between one and the other. What is morally correct, what is not, how I should act. And to give you another example that happened to me during an adventure, I gave as a present to my friend Togashi that helped me in the Shadowlands, basically a secret of the unicorn, Kirin, that we used to travel across Rokugan in just a few minutes. And I told him just use it only when you are in danger. And the thing that he basically exposed me in front of everyone, saying that I was gentle enough to pay my life debt, giving him a clan secret. Yeah, he did that. And later on, he paid for that. But it was a very long story, actually. So, what the game gave me? The game also gave me something personal. It gave me one of my first long campaigns, my first Moto character, my first real experiences directing the same world for different groups. It also encouraged me to translate, to write, to create, and also to understand and become known to other role playing gamers and have really good adventures along my lifetime. So the first edition gave us a clear entrance: choose a clan, choose a family, choose a school, answer the questions, and begin. The supplements made the world larger, stranger, and more complicated, but the central conflict remained the same. What does your character want? What does their clan expect? And what happens when those two things are no longer compatible? The best campaigns are not remembered because the characters always succeeded. They are remembered because their decisions meant something and have consequences. And in Rokugan, almost every decision belongs to more than one person. It belongs to a family, to a clan, a lore, and sometimes an entire empire. So now tell me, if you have played Legend of the Five Rings, tell me which clan you choose first, and whether you remain loyal to it, or maybe you change it later to check on how you will develop other kinds of characters. Because people might change careers, countries, and entire belief systems, but an Legend of the Five Rings player will still defend the clan they selected 20 years ago. Thank you very much for joining me at IWASE-SAN'S table. Until next time, roll the dice, question the rules, and never accept tea from a scorpion without first updating your will. See ya!